Amen.
Proverbs 24, and we'll begin reading at verse number 30 this evening. Proverbs 24, verse 30. I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw, and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man.
Lately I've been looking back along this winding road to the old familiar markers of the mercies I have known. I know it may sound simple, but it's more than a cliche. There's no other way to tell you than to say, God's been good in my life. I feel blessed beyond my wildest dreams when I go to sleep each night. Though I've had my share of hard times, I wouldn't change them if I could, 'cause through it all, God's been good. Times replay and I can see I've cried some bitter tears, but I felt His arms around me as I faced my greatest fears. I've had more gains and losses, and I've known more joy than hurt as His grace rolled down upon me undeserved. God's been good in my life. I feel blessed beyond my wildest dreams when I go to sleep each night. Though I've had my share of hard times, I wouldn't change them if I could, 'cause through it all, God's been good. God has been my Father, my Savior, and my friend. His love was my beginning, and His love will be my end. I could spend forever trying to tell you everything He is, but the best way I can say it is this: God's been good in my life. I feel blessed beyond my wildest dreams when I go to sleep each night. Though I've had my share of hard times, I wouldn't change them if I could, 'cause through it all, God's been good. Through it all, God's been good.
Appreciate that song tonight. Got your Bibles open there at Proverbs chapter 24 this evening. Solomon is traveling down his way. It was oftentimes that he would look around and he would take in his surroundings and allow the things that he found around himself to teach him some things. It's a good thing to do whenever we can allow the things that come along in life, even the smallest of things, to help teach us some lessons. Solomon, observing the ant, watched him as he worked hard, and he prepared during the summertime so he'd be ready come winter time, and it taught Solomon some things that he would pass along to his son. That's similar to what we're looking at tonight in that Proverbs chapter 24. The Bible makes the statement here, and Solomon, as he is writing, he says this here. He says, I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And lo, it was grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. We don't live in a society necessarily that is ruled by stone walls any longer. If you were to go with us to Connecticut, you would find in many of the places up there that the border lines are still lined with stone walls. That's the way they did that. Even back in the 1700s, they were still using those stone walls. When I was thinking about this, though, I'm often reminded of our travels to Branson over to Silver Dollar City or to the Smoky Mountains, and as you look in there, you try to find you a postcard or something that you wanted to send back to let folks know that you were visiting there or whatnot, and you're showing, telling about what's going on there. But I remember these particular ones that always stood out to me were the ones that had the little one-room shack that had all the weeds growing up around it, and it was all fallen in, and it was all dilapidated and everything else. And then on the bottom it says, "Only 10 more payments and it's ours." I kind of feel that way right now, searching for a house that I might be willing to take somebody up on one of those at this point here. But we look at it, we laugh about it, but you do realize at one time that was somebody's house. At one time, it was a beautiful place. At one time, it was exactly what it needed to be. It was providing shelter. It was they did a good job of insulating things so they could have their family live there. The fields were not, the grass was not overgrown. There wasn't a broken down wagon out front or something else out there. It was a livable place, and it was one being taken care of. But something happened. Somebody got lazy. And instead of taking care of their things, all of a sudden it had run down. And we find a lot of places like that, don't we? We can travel through this area and we find places that I've often heard different ones say, "Oh man, I remember back when so-and-so built that place. Oh, it was beautiful." It's a shame to see what it's like now. And we've seen those places, haven't we? We've been by them. We know what Solomon is talking about when he says, "I was traveling down the road, and as I was going by, I noticed this man's property that he had, and I was sitting there and I'm looking at things, and I noticed that the weeds have all grown up. I noticed the thorns and the thistles and everything else has overtaken the property. And at one time it used to be a beautiful vineyard. At one time it used to produce wonderful wheat or whatever things they were growing there. And the walls there, the walls that used to be a protection for them, they're all broken down now. I know everybody's just kind of let loose with this here, and nobody's watching over these things anymore." So I watched and I went by those things, and I began to think about the things that needed to be done, and I began to think in my mind. Solomon said, "I considered it well." He said, "And I looked upon it and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. Suddenly poverty shows up. Suddenly the armed man shows up, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was little by little." Tonight I want us to think about some things here that I want to challenge our thoughts, if you will, towards our own lives. You understand the person who had that property had a valuable opportunity. See, people in that day and age there, in that society, they received their land by inheritance. And somewhere down the line, somewhere way back here, of course, David was before Solomon, and before him was King Saul, and before him was the time of the judges of some 400 years, and then prior to that was Joshua. And Joshua led the people into the land to conquer the land, and they had to drive out the Hivites and the Perizzites and all those other Baites along the way, and they were getting them all out of there and chasing them off. I can still hear Caleb as he's an 80-year-old man, 85-year-old man saying, "I'm just as strong as I ever was. I'm going to take that mountain. You give it to me." And he went in and he did. Because he said, "Hey, God made me a promise. That's my inheritance." And of course, there came a day when Caleb would close his eyes in death, and he would go and be with his God. And that inheritance then was handed down to his son. And his sons there, and it was separated amongst them. And then it went on down to his grandsons, and it was separated amongst them, and great-grandsons, and so on. And he just kept getting passed down. And in case you had to sell your land off, there was always the year of Jubilee, whenever this all went back to the original family. Because God gave each one an inheritance. And they said, that's your inheritance, and so you are responsible for this. And so here we are, we're some 500-600 years down the road, and as Solomon is riding along, I can see him maybe in his royal carriage or whatever he's riding around in, and he's got his servants taking him from place to place, and he's coming along through there, and he says, oh, hey, fellas, stop. What's the matter, King? Just give me a minute. Whose place is that? Oh, well, that was old. You remember Ezekiel, the son of Josiah, and they started going back, and they said, oh, he's one of those fellows. He's from the tribe of, we'll say, Judah. So, wow, that's his inheritance. Well, what happened there? What happened? Well, they just kind of got busy with things. It just kind of got going in this direction and that direction, and they just forgot about this, and, well, it's just kind of gotten overgrown a little bit, and it's just kind of fallen apart. Solomon began to think, that man's great-great-great-grandpa went in and he fought against the Jebusites to take this land, to provide an inheritance for his family. And here it is now, some 8-9 generations down the road, and his family can care less. I stopped. I considered it well. I got instruction from it. See, tonight, each one of us who sits in this room, God has given us some fields in our lives. He's given us some things that just not anybody gets. And you understand that these fields that we've been given, God's looking at us and saying, hey, tonight, are you taking care of your fields? Are you taking care of your fields? So God's given us some wonderful things. He's given us some wonderful blessings. Lorena just sang about how good God is and all the blessings He's given to us, and truly that is the case. But if we're not careful, we will lose sight of the blessings that God has given us, and we will take them for granted, and we will not put in the effort that is necessary to become successful with those fields He's given to us. And so tonight I want to challenge us with this thought tonight: take care of your field. Take care of your fields. God has given us many fields tonight. I want us to think about a few of them. There's some, I will not get to all of them, obviously, because each one of us, we have some unique fields. Some of you in here, you've got the mountains like Caleb has. Others, you're down in the valley and you got the low ground. And others, you got some unique fields that are unique to each one of us. But there are some fields that are common to all of us. And I want us to think about these tonight here for a little bit and ask ourselves, hey, how am I doing in taking care of my fields? Think about this here. God has given each one of us the field of our life. Don't take life for granted. Life is precious. Life is precious. We often don't realize how precious life is until it is gone. How often have we said that somebody who has already gone on and they've passed off the scene already, that we've already said many a time, and say, well, I wish I had just another 5 minutes with them. Or I wish I had just one more meal with them. Oh, I wish I had just a little more time. Oh, life is so precious. Yeah. And boy, once it's gone, it's gone. Once those few minutes that you had that maybe you waste with that person that God's given to you, can I just tell you, you need to be careful that you don't take life for granted. Your life is precious. Your life is an inheritance that God has given to you, and one day you will stand before God and you will give an account for your life. For how you spent your life. And listen, I would hate to be one who stands before God and say, well, I just kind of floated through life and I just kind of did whatever, and whatever came, I just kind of went with the currents and I just went. No. Listen, God expects us to do more with our life than just go with the flow. He expects us to make a stand. He expects us to have a light and to be a salt, be a witness for Him. He expects us to do something with His precious life He's given to us. He gives us many warnings here in the book of Proverbs and instruction about this. Turn with me, if you would, back to Proverbs chapter number 1. As Solomon is giving instruction to his son, he's warning him about the life that has been given to him and for him to take advantage of that. Look at Proverbs chapter 1. Look at verse number 10. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. He goes on to begin to explain to him the things that they would try to entice him into and how it will be a ruin to his life. We need to be careful with the folks we let have influence on our life, because they may ruin your life.
Yes, sir.
My son, if sinners entice thee, consent now not. Turn over just a page maybe for you to Proverbs chapter 3. Look at verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. Give an instruction for our life. Listen, we don't always know the best way. We don't always know what's best for us, but God does, always. Amen. And He says, hey, look, don't trust your own self. Look to God. And oh, how Rehoboam, if he had listened. Oh, if he had listened and he had taken the counsel of the wise men that were once his father's counselors, instead of listening to the guys, his companions, instead he could have saved himself heartache and headache. But no, he wanted to do things his way. And he lost the kingdom. There was a great civil war because he chose to trust his own understanding instead of seeking God's understanding. Look at Proverbs chapter 4, verse number 5. Solomon again, get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not. Neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. That's a principle for life. Hey, you've got life. Hey, go search out wisdom and get it, and hold on to it with all you've got. It's the principal thing. Not knowledge. Some have that whole cavern of useless knowledge. They can tell you how fast a snail can crawl across the ground. Who cares? But you know it. It's amazing sometimes the useless knowledge. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about wisdom, things that are going to pertain to life, things that are going to make you give wise decisions and then have understanding, know how to use it. It does no good to have wisdom then when you don't know how to use it. That's a life principle for us. Look at chapter 4 and verse 23. Keep thy heart with all diligence. Why, Dad? For out of it are the issues of life. You want to know what kind of issues you're going to have in life? You want to know what you're going to deal with in life? Well, what are you letting in your heart? What are you letting in your heart? And you see, he gives this instruction to them. Turn over to chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 3. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. Hey, learn to close your mouth. There's a time to be silent. There's a time to listen. There's a time not to be talking. He said you need to use good wisdom in that, son. Look at verse 20 of chapter 13. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Look at who you're hanging out with. Look at who you're letting into your life. He said those who have wise friends end up being okay. Those who have foolish friends get destroyed. Chapter 15, verse 1. How do you handle hard things? A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Oh, those are life principles. Those are things that help you in your life. And God says, hey, I've given you this precious gift of life, and so learn how to use it and go about it. Take care of it. Don't just say, well, whatever comes, comes. No. That's the man who ends up having a broken down wall, and that's the man who has things grown up. That's the man whose inheritance has been wasted. We don't want to waste our opportunity that God gives us, and so many more that we could look at tonight, but we don't want to take times. But even look at one more, chapter 16 and verse 3. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. Commit thy works unto the Lord. God, I want to serve you. God, I want to do what you want me to do. And so, Lord, I'm looking for your counsel. I'm looking for you to lead me on the way here. And he says, I'll help you think things through the right way. Commit thy works unto the Lord. Thy thoughts shall be established. How is it that some people can make the right decision every time? Their works are committed unto the Lord. They want to be pleasing to the Lord. They want God to be pleased with their life, and so they strive to be what He wants them to be, and He helps them along the way. Each of these give us instruction for our life now, and so if we're to take heed to your life and purpose to keep your field, these are to help us in preserving and making sure our life turns out the way God wants us to. Each one of us, everybody in this room, you're drawing breath. You've got a field. It's called your life. Are you taking care of it? Are you putting up the walls? Are you taking care of those walls? Are you putting the parameters up so that you can make sure things get taken care of? All of us in this room, we have families. God's given you the gift of your family. Some of you have children. Some of you have grandchildren. And think about it. God has blessed you. God has blessed you with a wonderful, wonderful family. And He said, here's your family, and I take care of it now. I was talking with Brother Vinny in the office here before church, and we were talking about a variety of different ones and just different folks that are in the ministry and whatnot. And I made this statement to him, said, I remember our pastor in Connecticut always made this statement. He said, my first ministry is my family. My first ministry is my family. He said the church is second to my family. He said, obviously the Lord is number one in my life. He said, but as far as things go on down in here, he says, my first responsibility, my first ministry is my family. There were some folks in our church who didn't like that. He didn't bother him one bit. Because he knew if he lost his family, he's lost his ministry for sure, but if he's lost his family, what else matters? These are gifts that God has given to him. And God gives us these families, and God gives us instruction in His Word on how to train up a child in the way he should go. God gives us a way of husband, how you're supposed to treat your wife, and wife, how you're supposed to treat your husband. And God gives us instruction concerning our families. Why would God go to all that time to give us instruction? Because it's important. It's a field I've given to you, and you need to make sure that you are keeping things in good order. Satan would love nothing more than to get into this church family and start tearing up families one by one. Oh, don't think he's ignoring us. Oh, he's watching. And he's saying, I'm waiting for you to give that little crevice there. I'm waiting for you to give that crack. I'm waiting for you to that part of the wall doesn't matter. He said, no, take care of your field tonight. You've got a family. Take care of your family. Take care of your life. But also this here, take care of the church that God's given to you. Take care of the church that God has given to you. I know the pastor has a good amount of responsibility, but can I tell you, it's all of our responsibilities around here to make sure that this thing is on the right track. Right. You know, it's your responsibility to be careful of what kind of spiritual influence you're letting into your household and you're letting into your church. Hey, listen, Sunday school teacher, you got to make sure that you're not letting some guy who's out here on the outside, some YouTube evangelist, to come in and teach you some things that would go against the Word of God. Oh, he makes it sound good, but listen, be careful. Wolves show up in sheep clothing. They look like us, they sound like us, but all of a sudden they want to start taking some things away, and they're not so worried about that name on the church house. They're not worried about you being a Baptist any longer. They're not worried about what kind of Bible you're going to use. They're not worried about whether or not we're reaching out to the community. They're not worried about the kind of music that goes on, and they begin to lay some little bits of seeds of doubt. Be careful. Be careful. Satan will love nothing more than to see the doors of this church closed, or even better, just have a handful of folks who are still coming, and all everybody wants to talk about is the good old days. You understand that God has wonderful days ahead for us? Amen. But they're only on one condition, that we're going to make sure He stays preeminent and we make sure that His Word is prominent. And we got to make sure that Satan does not have an opportunity to get in here and tear this church up. Listen, God has given you this field called the church. It's a place of spiritual nourishment. It's a place of spiritual encouragement. It's this place to help us out as we go along. And so many other fields we could talk about, the opportunities God has given to you, whether it's out in the community or whether it's through maybe some sports avenues. Or they're just, God gives us opportunities all around. We all have these fields here, and God wants us to take care of those fields. It's our responsibility to take care of them. Excuse me. There are problems in the field. And problems we see here is number one, we see the thorns and the nettles that the Bible describes here that has come into the field. That was not the original intent. When we were living in Trenton, Missouri, our folks, a good number of our folks were farmers. They had cornfields and soybean fields. I mean, that was the big thing. That seemed like we would go out to their places and whatnot. It seemed like corn and soybean was everywhere, wherever we went to. And that was their way of life. And as they would go about in their fields, and they would, not right now, they're doing all the planting and getting everything in the ground. And what they've done ahead of time is they've gone through and they've treated their fields and have put certain things down to help keep the weeds down, to help keep all the stray stuff coming along in there. They don't want those things. Why? Because it's going to choke out their harvest. It's going to make their harvest give it less of a yield than what it needs to be. And so they go along and they work hard. And I've seen our men out there as we have one in particular, Brother Doug. He liked to always put YouTube videos up of him going out and doing his field and all that stuff, and want you to see what was going on. But as soon as that sun was up and they were able to get out to the fields, they would jump in those big old tractors and they would go out there with the disking and doing all that, or spraying the anhydrous or whatever it was that needed to be done. They were going about working hard from sun up to sundown and watching these guys, and they're going through and they're looking at everything, trying to make sure that all these things stay out. Why? Because they want a good harvest. They're looking to take care of their fields. There was other places, I remember we would drive by and we would see other fields, and you would see some of the corn or the soybean coming up, but along with that you saw a lot of junk. I remember one time riding along with Doug, I was looking out there and I saw one of these particular fields. I said, what's going on with that field over there? It looks like they're supposed to have soybean. It looks like there's got a lot of other junk out there too. He just kind of shook his head and said, yeah, that guy, he just put some seed out there and was hoping that it would take. And he said he'll get a little bit, but he won't get what he could. He said because all those weeds are growing up all through there, and it's just going to choke it out. And said it's going to cost him more to put all that stuff out, because he didn't bother taking care of his field. God's given us some fields. But listen, there's somebody who's looking for an opportunity to throw some things into your field so that you are not as productive as you should be. The Bible uses several illustrations, several parables that Christ gave in Matthew chapter number 13 and verse 24 through 30. We're given the parable of the wheat and the tares. And we have a man who has sown a field with wheat, but while he was asleep, the Bible says the enemy came in and he mixed tares in with it. Now Jesus goes on to give further instruction to his disciples in this particular parable in verses 37 through 43. He says the enemy there is that wicked one, or Satan, who comes in. But he tells them this here, that between the parable and the account of Proverbs 24, the tares and those thistles and the thorns came up while they were sleeping. Boy, sometimes we get to where we just want to take it easy and we just want to take a rest, and we've been at this for so long, we've been doing this for so long, can't we just kind of kick it in neutral for a little while? Can I just tell you, it's important for us to stay awake. It's important for us to stay alert to what the enemy is about. He's looking for those who say, hey, I've done this for X amount of time. Hey, I've done my time and I'm just going to sit back and want to coast the rest of the way in. He says that's not the way to do it. You got to stay watchful. You got to be watchful. You got to be watchful for your enemy coming in. He's looking for those opportunities to come in. He wants to sow some tares and some thorns and some nettles into your life. He wants to sow them into your kids' life. He wants to sow them into your grandchildren's life. He's looking. Why? Because he'd like to see a generation that is less productive for the Lord. I would ask you to, and I would implore you to go back in your own life and ask yourself, was there a time where I was more productive for my Lord? Was there a time whenever I was doing more for my Lord? Why is that? Tares, thorns, thistles, a little bit of sleep. Well, we've got to be watchful. God's given us a field to take care of, and He expects us to hand down an inheritance to the next generation that's going to be worth something, worth keeping up with. He also says this, he said the stone wall was broken down. That would allow anyone or anything in the field to come through that field and to get in there. In the Song of Solomon, chapter 2 and verse 15, Solomon warns, he says, it's the little foxes that come in and spoil the vine. It's not the big things. It's not murder. It's not adultery. It's just the little things here, just a little bit of a lie here. It's just, well, I don't see the big deal about this. Well, that's not, I know, it's wrong, but I don't think it'll have an effect on me. It will. It's little foxes. It's the little things. The things that if somebody were to hear that you were up to, they say, well, that's not a big deal. It's the things that we like to justify. It's the little foxes. We got to keep those walls up. There was a serious breach of security for the fields because the man had fallen asleep. And boy, we've got to be thoughtful. We've got to be watchful. We've got to take seriously that which we're letting come into our lives, our children, our church, and the fields that God has given to us. We got to stay on guard, if you will, to make sure that these things don't come in, become part of our field. It may mean saying no to some of our conveniences. It may mean saying no to some of our friends. It may mean saying no to some that we can't put a finger on, but we know it's not helping. The Bible warns us and implores us it is high time to awake out of our sleep. What we are seeing in our country today is a result of many tares and thistles and thorns being sown in our society. Things that we said was not a big deal have suddenly become a very big deal. So what's the results? Well, first we see here is, we mentioned this earlier, but look again at verse 33 with me. He says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. It's a ease there in the beginning will bring difficulty in the end. What is he pointing out to us? There's a common word in that verse, and that word is little. Yeah. It's not a lot. It's not somebody going off the rails. It's just a little compromise here. It's just a little wavering here. It's just a little crack here. It's just a little something here. Oh, it's not a big deal, preacher. It's not a big deal. It may be a bigger deal than what you realize down the road. It's a lot easier to take care of a problem while it's little than it is until it gets to the point to where it is full-blown out of control and we cannot bring it back in. It doesn't take much for the enemy to come and ruin what has been worked for and worked on for years and years. What happens? Poverty. What happens? Want. And not talking about necessarily a physical thing here. We're not talking about, well, suddenly my bank account is dry. We're talking about spiritually. Yes. Preacher, why is it that my kids have no desire for the things of the Lord? Well, what have they been feasting on? What have you let in the house? What have you told them is not a big deal? Folks who once were committed to the church and committed to the things of God, committed to leading their families, now they're out going out onto the ball games instead on Sunday. They find that the lake is more important than church on Sunday. They find taking the camping trip and just getting a little time away. You know what you're telling your kids? Church isn't a big deal. Church isn't a big deal. God's not a big deal. He can fit into our schedule. At one time, everything worked around the church's schedule.
Yes, sir.
It's not the way anymore. It's not that way anymore. What's happened? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding the hands to sleep. Why is it that our country is in the condition that it is? Why is it going downhill so fast? Real simple. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding the hands. Why is it that the church has lost its power? Why is the church doesn't have the same effect it once had? Why is it the church no longer has the testimony that it once had in the community? Real simple. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding the hands to sleep. You understand, nobody starts out wanting to be a pauper. Nobody has as their goal to rear up a bunch of ungodly children. But it's when the field is not taken care of properly, the enemy amazingly finds a way in, and he is able to take away that which we have worked for so long. Solomon says he went by the field and he took some instruction. Solomon, the wisest man in all the world. The Bible tells us that there's never been one as wise as Solomon, humanly speaking. And yet what did he say? I received instruction. I received instruction. Sometimes we get so bullheaded that nobody can tell us anything. And nobody can give us instruction. And here it is, the wisest man in all the world. He said, man, I saw a field broken down and I stopped and considered it and I received some instruction. Tonight I'm asking you, would you take the time to take a step back and ask the Lord to do this for you tonight? Lord, what fields have you given to me? It's good for us to go through and know where our fields are, isn't it? Every farmer, every person who's got cattle around here, they know where their fields are. They know what's theirs and what's the other guys. They know where their fields are. They put the fences up around so they can keep track where their fields are. They know where their fields are. It'd be good for us to go through and say, God, would you please help me out tonight? Would you give me some instruction? Would you help me to identify my fields tonight? What fields do you have? What fields do you have? Stop. I'm asking you right now, just think through this. What fields has God given you? What spheres of influence has God given to you? That's a field. That's something that you're going to answer for one day. That's something that you're going to be able to give an account to God on and say, and God's going to say, how'd you take care of that field I gave to you? And you'll be able to say, Lord, here's what I've done. Or maybe we hang our head in shame because I let the walls get broken down. I let the nettles and the thorns and everything grow up. Or I didn't take care of that field. It'd be much better for us to identify those fields tonight and start putting some effort into them. Hey, let's check our walls. Hey, let's do a quick let's go through and let's check the landscape. Do we see any thorns? Do we see any nettles? Do we see anything kind of growing up in there that we're not really crazy about? You say, well, I don't know what's wrong. I just know something's not right. Well, start getting those things out. What's the source of those things? How are they getting into our lives? Listen, Satan has a desire. He wants, the Bible tells us here, Jesus, as he's talking to Peter, he says, listen, Peter, Satan desires to sift you as wheat. He wants to destroy you. And listen, that's just not for Peter. That was for each one of those men that night. That's for each one of us who's sitting here tonight. Satan desires to take your life and he desires to sift you as wheat. He desires to destroy you. Listen, Satan is not your friend. He's not your buddy. He's not your compadre. Listen, he's waiting for you to get down to that pig pen one day too, just like the prodigal son. And then he will laugh at you and he'll leave you out there and say, I got nothing for you, bud. You shouldn't have listened to me. That's exactly what he's going to do to you one day. So we got to take care of our fields. We got to be watchful. Don't be like the person who just lets things go and they look back at life and say, man, what happened? My life's a wreck. I mean, I went to church. It's not enough to go to church. You got to put some effort in. It's not enough to say, kids, go to church. Mom and Dad, we're going to stay at home and eat bonbons. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's a rare thing. It happens sometimes, but it's a rare thing for you to put a kid on a bus and say, you go to Sunday school, we're staying home. You know why? Because as soon as they're old enough, you know what they're going to do? They're going to stay at home too. So don't think, and I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight, but can I just tell you, we got to be careful, because there's a thing that Satan wants to do to us, and he wants to get in our minds and say, hey, you've done enough. Oh, you've given enough. You put more into this thing than you should have. What's God given you? Hey, listen, just take your ease. Eat, drink, and be merry. Take your ease. You've done so much work. And that's just what the enemy's waiting for. We all have fields in our lives. And Satan wants to mess with every one of them. Yeah. He does. Young people, Satan would love to do nothing more than right now than to destroy you before you ever get started.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
He wants you to get to the point where you're like, this church stuff, I don't need that. I've got this figured out. He's going to take you, he's going to sift you, and he's going to rub you till you're nothing but rubbish. You don't believe me? Go talk to Brother Jeff. 40-some years down in junior church, you've seen the young people come through. You've watched them ride our buses in. And we go to the houses even now. We pick up some of their kids. Yep. And we see the life that they live, why they got too smart for God. Ask Brother Miller. He's been around here for 30-some years now. You've taught the Christian school. You've seen all the good kids come through. Where are all they at? I got this all figured out. Where are their parents at? Where are those who used to sit in this room and used to be faithful, but now they're out? What happened? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. A little sleep, a little slumber.
Yes, sir.
A little fold in the hands of sleep. Suddenly it won't happen to me, preacher. It can. It can happen to me. I know it. It can happen to me. So I got to be careful. I got to be watchful. I got to be mindful of what Satan is trying to do in my life. Got to be mindful of what he's trying to do in our marriage. Love nothing more than to tear us up if he could.
Yep.
So that one day somebody would say, hey, what's old Brian Wilson up to these days? Oh, you didn't hear? I thought he was pastor. No, man, that was a few years ago. Man, this happened and that happened, and before you knew it, man, he and his wife got divorced. And I mean, well, where's he at? Well, you know why? I know those stories. Men who've preached behind this pulpit, who sit in jail tonight.
That's right.
Because little sleep, little slumber, little fold in the hands of sleep. I'm telling you, Satan wants to take every one of us, no matter where we're at tonight in our life. He wants to destroy us. He wants to tear down the walls. He wants to plant the thistles and the thorns, and he wants to destroy our lives.
Good preaching.
Don't let him have it. Maybe tonight we just need to come and just say, hey, Lord, I'm not taking care of my field right. Would you help me to get it straightened out? Or would you help me to rebuild those walls that I know there's going to be those who are going to complain about, and I know there are going to be those who are going to say, give him some time, he'll quit on this again. No, Lord, I need your help tonight. Lord, I need to get those walls up. Lord, I need you to help me to get those thorns and those thistles. Lord, I want to be useful to you. Lord, I want to be able to stand before you one day and say, Lord, I took care of the fields you gave to me. Lord, they were productive to the very end because I was watchful and careful.